What up, folks? Man, that was a good one. Carmen, that's how excited I am that you're here. You got a very long what up, folks. How are you doing? Welcome to the Mikey G podcast experience.
I'm doing great, and I want to thank you so much for being here.
Of course, man. I think we both have like pretty soothing voices. So I think the task that's going to be at hand today for most people is try not to fall asleep. Like, I know, but we really mean it. We mean passion, and I have really actually slowed my voice down over the last 4 years because of what we were talking about before, intentionality. And I think it really does help create impact when you're having a show like this. And I feel like you've picked up similar skill sets. Am I right or wrong there?
You're on point. I get the comments a lot. Sometimes I'm often surprised when people say that I'm soft spoken, but I think it's that intentionality point. It's that growth, maturity, wisdom that you just say it almost with your chest, but from inside.
Dude, 100%. And I think if you were to meet me in real life, Mikey G is the absolutely fun-loving kind of life of the party guy. But people listen to me and they're like, "Yeah, you're a pretty calm individual." And I'm like, "Oh, that's just not the case." But the intentionality, that's such a good word. That's such a good word. And I think not many people do that. It's one of my pillars up to the company that I started long ago that is called Midlife Crisis. And one of our pillars was deeply think about everything with intention, right? Like understand why people are saying things instead of just react. But we're already getting deep here. What are your thoughts about that real quick before I actually introduce you?
I thought about it as a communicator. Sometimes I feel like it's a blur when I'm speaking because I'm speaking from the heart, because I'm speaking, my truth. And sometimes I'm trying to first take away the layer of overthinking and just say it, there's an intentionality to it, but it's got to come from experience. It's got to come from the I know this, and naturally it comes out. And I kind of really want to always come from a place like that. And oftentimes I also get called out when I don't speak so much, that it's the why, why, what do you have to say? What are you thinking? But I've limited my opinions quite a bit, as I've gone into the learner seat. So
yeah,
I feel like I'm in a mode of observing and digesting and really taking a lot of things in, especially being in the space we're in.
And see what you did right there? Like, this is what I love about what I do is like you just have said the thoughts that I have had in just a different way. And I like your explanation of you get so lost in it, you almost like forget what you're doing. It's like that moment where you're driving the car and you're like 30 miles down the road and you're like, I don't remember driving at all. Because
there were some stop signs.
Right.
There were lights.
And it starts becoming, and this is a whole nother conversation we can talk about further down the podcast. And this comes up a lot, which is talent versus natural ability, innate ability, and getting into the zone. And that's what it feels like for me. Into the zone, it's an extension of your body, is what it boils down to for me. That's how I would describe it. Because when the best of the best operate, you don't have time to like think about the mechanics. You're just in the moment and you're doing it, and you've done it so many times. It's just a natural part of who you are. It's a beautiful thing.
I find that to be so true.
Mm-hmm.
I think in my younger years, you think about my communication style then felt like it had to have a result.
Right.
It had to have a direction. It had to have something, to end point on. And now I'm like, okay with just letting the feeling out, letting the thought out, and
Right.
seeing how it's taken, what happens with it.
Oh, 100%. So amazing. I will say this. Your voice is very soothing, but it might be a little, I don't know if people are having a hard time hearing. Like, is there any way you can turn it up a little bit?
I'll turn it up real hard.
There
And
we
I
go.
can speak up too,
Yeah, yeah.
as we mentioned. Yeah.
No,
So
that's better. That's better. But yeah, just be cognizant of that because I know you are intentionally trying to be at ease. It's totally cool. I just want to make sure people aren't losing anything. So, already see what we're doing here? We're just going off the cuff. We already dropped bombs. We dropped knowledge bombs. We already got people watching. They're excited that we just gave them knowledge bombs around intentionality. But we're going to go right into the thick of things. The one thing I did not tell you about the prep is I just want to take 30 seconds to a minute to update about myself. Lots of really, really cool conversations coming on. Cryptid Mystic is going on next week. She's just a really interesting human being that lives in good old Humboldt County, just a really nice soul. She's part of this Green Pill collective of founders that are just trying to build the right way. Mad Queen is the person that leads the charge of these cohorts of people, and I got introduced them to somebody from my community. So I have a couple of them coming on. Just talked to squirrels from the unicorn meme coin on Abstract. I'm talking to Oni Force, Star Lordy, amazing human being. JR has already been on the podcast. Had such an intimate conversation with him. I think we talked for almost 4 hours, JR and I. Really excited to talk to Star Lordy. And then the big announcements you saw last week, I joined as a kind of like high-level executive partner for OG Triple Media. Our goal there is to, thank you. B-Rock has been on my podcast. He's an amazing human being. Janner, awesome person. Rock, he's the creative director for LT3 right now. We all have big brand media experience in Web 2. And we think there is a lack. And we could talk about what Onchain Foundation is doing and kind of like the different angle that we're taking. But I think a majority of the news media outlet people in Web3 are really focused on, does Bitcoin go up, down, meme coins go up, down, a lot of financially driven and how the tech is changing. I think there's a huge opportunity in the culture, community, art world to combine Web3 in the sense that let's showcase all the amazing creative people here and help proliferate the awesome content that we could create together to give exposure to Web 2. And then on the Web 2 side, giving them an into the Web 3 target market, but not by this scammy, we're going to create you an NFT and be in the Web 3. It is, we are going to give you a platform to talk about your product to see if our Web 3 culture is interested in it. And that can come in so many different forms with partnerships and brand collaborations and really kind of doubling down on the creative side. And I'm super excited about that. And then in addition, we're doing a lot of strategy with other founders in the background. And now I have your beautiful human self on this podcast as well. So enough about me. The rest is all about Carmen. And it was really exciting.
Before we pivot, can I just say how awesome it is that we get to use like our superhero names, like in Web3.
It
like
is.
The personas that we create,
Yes.
and that you know that they're just like good humans. And you know, that's one of my favorite parts.
Oh my God.
Coming from a corporate life to coming into Web3 and creating that persona of yourself, that name and that vibe, you know, to represent who you are, and letting that be something that you and I can drop a name and it's like, I get it. I know that person, you know?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, not only do you know the people, I think that's back to what I was saying, right? The creative opportunity is these people have almost had this like alter ecosystem to bring out the best in their creativity, and they should be able to showcase that. There's so much untapped potential, I think, in Web3 community and creativity because they don't, like, everyone's still stuck in this crypto Twitter echo chamber. And it's like, guys, you are missing the point. Like if you can take this expertise outside of this crypto Twitter wall, there's endless opportunity. You know, I was the guy spending a lot of money, and I know how quickly I could make a decision based off of interesting people doing interesting things. And there's a lot of money to be spent. So we should be taking advantage of that and helping empowering the people that way, not yet again this secular cannibalization of liquidity pulling back to the same people making the same money and draining out the same people. Like, let's get out of this. Let's expand it. This is the only way you're going to be able to grow. And it's happening quickly. I'm seeing more and more people talk about the non-beautiful human beings in the space, and the beautiful human beings. I think it's going to be their moment here soon, and I want to help empower that. Pretty damn excited. Beautiful statement. So Carmen, she has been doing BD and Web3 for a while. She's working at Onchain currently right now. She also worked as an advisor with the Blockchain Legal Institute. She uses her expertise to help shape the future of digital assets and also works with legal frameworks. Can't wait to talk about that. But here's what I'm really excited about. You spent 20 years in retail sales, kind of honing your skills, relationship, people, like that's all face to face. And I can't wait for the conversation on how that has helped impact your Web3 journey and how important it is as a skill set for you to grow. And then finally, this is the exciting part. What most people don't know about Carmen, she was pre-med before this all started to happen. So just tell me a little bit about that and why the drastic shift.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people in the Web3 network that I have know this, that my first love was science. I actually wanted to go be a geneticist, and I actually studied for it. And I really took a pivot because underlying like all of the academics, I started taking a minor in speech, and I really loved speaking, and I loved teaching, and I loved influencing and persuading, and all of these skill sets that I felt just came so natural. And I was good at the science, but this felt like a calling. And it led me into a career. I'm like, hey, you know, if doctors make money, I got to find an alternative if I'm not going to go down this route. And so it really led me into the retail sales, where I felt like there was no ceiling. Your performance is paid for. You know, the effort that you put in comes out in dollars. And it wouldn't be a bad opportunity for me to use my talent of connecting with people. And it actually was probably one of the best decisions that I made in my life, because it gave me a lot of opportunity to grow with something that I was already good at.
Yeah. And I think what you said, and I don't like this is going to be my question before I even get to the main question is, you recognized seemingly early on that you liked the people and you had the personality for that connection. Was that at this moment in time where you were like, I like the science, I'm good at it, but something doesn't feel right? Or was it a series of events we can talk about later?
Yeah, I think it stems from your childhood expectations. I think, you know, I will go into my journey and what that looked like, but I think I had a plan of how I wanted life to go, what I thought success looked like, what I thought was going to be, you know, what my legacy and achievements were going to be. And then I grew up and I realized that doing something you love is more important. Doing something that you're passionate about and something that comes easy to you is probably where you need to spend your energy. And so I started there, and it was difficult because it wasn't something I felt a lot of people were going to support me on. It wasn't as impressive. So it was a time in life where you just have to kind of stick to your guns, be authentic, and do what you feel in your gut was right. And I'm glad I did.
I can't wait to talk about that. So with that being said, we're already digging in a little bit deeper, but let's hit from the beginning. The world famous Mikey G podcast question is, Carmen, how did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? Please give me chapter 1, 2, and 3. To reiterate for the audience that has never listened to this show or will be listening to this later on Spotify, please, when we talk about chapter one, I'm really interested in your childhood. And thought starters that we talked about before were vivid memories. Were you a tinkerer? Did you play sports? Did your parents or parental figures deal any mantras to you that still stick in your head today? Chapter two is schooling, like we just talked about a little bit, your professional career. But here, like I said again, too, is lessons learned, right? I'm really interested because these failures and this adversity really give you the insights to progress, learn, and grow. And that's the main thing that we do here. Like everyone's like, oh, Mikey G's in Web3 and he's a content creator. At the end of the day, I like Web3, but my brand is much bigger. It's about making an impact on the world through these human stories. So those insights are critically important. And then three, why I told you earlier that I'm really interested in this conversation is I deal with a lot of people, even especially in my community, right, that want to work full time in Web3. You're a version of this. A lot of times I deal with founders of really big companies, and that can be intimidating to some people sometimes. But you're living proof of somebody that has worked many different roles within Web3 and can leave Web 2 and have a full time career. And people ask me this time and time again, week in and week out. So let's have at it. Let's start with chapter one, anywhere you want to go, and we will go from there. I cannot wait to hear it.
Well, we're getting into this, so we're going to go really deep. And in fact, we're going to go Challenger deep. It's a pun because the country that I come from is called the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And it's the home of the Marianas Trench where the Challenger Deep is. So that's how deep we're going to go today, Mikey. It really defined a part of my life. I was actually born in the United States because my parents met in Utah. My mother, her side of the family was French Canadian, and my father was from Micronesia. And they fell in love. They had me and my brother. And by the time my father was out of his first 4 years of the military, being in the Army, he went into the reserves. And about grade 3, I moved to his home country in Saipan. Saipan is an island that's about 5 miles wide, 15 miles long.
Wow.
15 degrees from the equator. It's extremely hot and humid and tropical. That move from being roughly about maybe 8 years old or so and moving outside of the United States, outside of the comforts of, what America was and all the consumer things you had access to, the culture, the pop culture and everything, and going to a country that almost felt kind of third world. I mean, tiny. It was no single highway, no single tall building in place. It was a big shock for me. In fact, as a kid, I used to joke that I'm like, are we poor now? Like, what happened?
Right.
But I always knew my father came from a culture. He was native somewhere. He had his own language. I was meeting my aunts, and he was from a very big family. He was one of 11 and the eldest son. And in my generation, I'm the eldest daughter. I'm the eldest grandchild on both my mother and my father's side. And I was the first woman to go to college eventually. But my father was the first in his entire family to accomplish getting a degree and going through the military. And then he kind of did his big return home with his family. And that's where we set roots. And that's where I was until I graduated high school. I was one of 6.
Talk to me about that, right? So you said this culture shock, but I'm sure you look back on, I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, but it could be interpreted as a simpler life because you don't have all of this crazy crap constantly distracted. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? And maybe looking back, and remember, all of this is really reflective, right? We are reflecting. This is not more or less like, I'm not expecting you to come to conclusions when you're in the moment, but looking back and how you think that's impacted your mindset. I've had a lot of people on this show that have come from remote places, right? The guy, Exceed, who has K's Creations, he's creating the banners of Web3. He grew up in a really remote Chinese, fishing village, and he had some really interesting insights. So, what are those for you?
Well, we too had villages. So I lived in the village of San Antonio on Saipan, and we lived in the home that my father grew up in. And when I say the shock happened, I went from living in military housing in Hawaii, moving to another tinier island, and now I was taking showers out of a bucket with cold water. We didn't have a kitchen. I was washing clothes and hanging them out to dry. We didn't have AC, but we had our family and we had my father's family. And I just knew that this was his home and it was now our home. And, I had to go through the adjustment. And another thing that really defined that moment for me was coming from America and being roughly about like in the third grade, coming and transferring into another elementary school on the island. There was like all this commotion of like, where do we put her? Like, she's probably a little bit more advanced. Maybe she could skip a grade. And as a child, you're just kind of thinking like, number one, I'm different. It's obvious, right? These conversations are happening. But if this conversation that's happening is something I've never heard of, I've never been accused of being smarter. I've never been accused of being ahead. So, it just kind of defined for me like this new thing that I almost had to uphold, just this, okay, stay ahead, own up to it, live up to it, and let's see what happened. And eventually I didn't change any grades. I stayed where I was. But another part of the shock was that I didn't speak the language. So I only spoke English. And in my country, they have two native languages, one that my father spoke and then English. So I went from living in a place where I felt like a minority, going to a place where people actually saw me as very white and very American. And I sounded it. So I started experiencing little shifts in things that were kind of shaking up my identity. And I had to kind of find my footing.
Interesting. And so this might not have happened till later, but is there anything from this era that helped or maybe started to get your footing and grounding on that identity? Because this is huge for a lot of people, right? I've been fortunate in the sense that my identity came from more of my parents getting divorced and trying to figure that out, and there's a whole slew there. But as far as like being a white dude from middle class America, like I didn't have those struggles. So what does for you going through that experience, and did it start early on when you reflect back? If not, we can talk about it later, because I think this is a fascinating topic that people struggle with, obviously, on a daily basis.
Yeah, I would say it affected me in a way that, and I've mentioned this before to you, when I'm trying to find my footing, I go into observer mode. So I think I got really quiet. I think I got really shy. I was trying to kind of step on eggshells because there were cultural traditions too, different things that you would do with aunties and uncles and how you greet them and different holidays, and this shift of now kind of bringing this really native culture that I'm a part of and trying to adapt to it, trying to be a part of it, even though I felt like an outsider. And so I would probably say it wasn't until maybe the eighth grade that, I kind of realized what my family resources were and that I kind of needed to get out of my shell, be a little bit more authentic. And more so, I think I got a little bit more aggressive with like, hey, this is going to be make it or break it. Either I'm staying here on this island or I'm finding my path to kind of create my own goals and find my path to achieve them. And so right before high school is when I really just started getting very academically focused, started getting out of my shell. I was a singer. I was performing, across the island, different events for the governor. I started really socializing and creating a brand for myself. Like, who is Carmen? What is she known for? And it was almost from a very competitive standpoint. So I went through high school. And for those 4 years, I really hunkered down and said, hey, I don't think my parents can afford to send me to college. So I need to achieve whatever I can so I can earn the ability to go to college. And in my country, there were a couple of high schools there. And because of the nature and the resources of the country, they really can only give out like 2 full ride scholarships. So not only do you have to be a valedictorian of a school, you have to be like a top 2 out of all the valedictorians. And so
Interesting.
I hunkered down and I achieved it. I was a class of 2000 and I did it.
So this is interesting to me in the sense that sometimes, well, it could work either way, right? When you're in a more secluded place with maybe not as much technology and infrastructure like you were talking about, that could be interpreted as a disadvantage. But on the other side, there are some of the smartest, most hardest working people that come from that. And so, what do you think, looking back, separated you from the rest? Because like you said, there's only 2 out of 2000. So I'm assuming there's a lot of people that decided to stay on the island and live that way of life. Why do you think it was different for you?
I think I've always had this feeling inside of me that I wanted to achieve more. That it wasn't about recognition, it wasn't about the accolade, it was about the impact. Like, what can I do for others? So, every single thing that I did was really a lot of it was centered around education. That's what made me so successful in my career was leading teams, educating, helping people grow and helping them facilitate transformation and obtain the goals. And it was because it was something that I was doing for myself. Like I enjoyed the challenge of saying, you're going to underestimate me. Well, hold my beer kind of moments, you kind of have to have that belief in yourself of like, okay, if you can do it, why can't I? Like from a scientific level, like we're human, you're human. And as a child, I think I was naive in that sense of just feeling like everybody was built the same. And it was just about the effort. And I think a
Mm,
lot of these values and these beliefs have definitely evolved, now for me. They've changed and the experiences have helped me kind of unpacked what those things meant for me in that period of time. But it did allow me to achieve a lot. And, right before I graduated high school, my first job ever was at our local library. There was only one on the island. And that was the year that they got the internet. So we're going full blown Web 1. And my job at that time at 16 was just to sit at a desk in front of a line of 10 computers and sign people in and make sure there's no fighting over the computers, right? This was a time during Internet Web 1, you're reading, you got CD-ROM towers. Well, for the 2.5 months that I was there for the summer, by the time I left there, I had raised about $40,000 from the local businesses to help upgrade their systems. I learned how to type. I learned how to surf the internet. I learned, that there was a whole world out there of people trying to connect with others. And I wanted to do something about it. And so that was my first ever job. It was my first ever experience with technology. And I actually really didn't even remember that experience until I got into Web3 when people started talking about this Web 1 experience. And I was like,
mhm.
where was I?
Yeah,
And
and
then
see,
boom.
this is what's cool about reflecting, and you've done it before, but if you had not, we probably would have come to this aha moment during this podcast, and this is what I love about it, because that was one of the more interesting things, you said in this last segment, but you also said something super interesting too that I just wanna reiterate, and this is definitely gonna be like a quote that we can embrace in the future, is and this is what's so cool about kids, man. My 22 month old, watching him just soak all this knowledge in and being so naive about the world. And when you said, hey, we're just all the same people, like, why can't we all do anything? Right? Like, you can do whatever you want because we're all just the same people. And that's just such a beautiful statement. And I think adults need to hear that more, right? If we can just get a little bit more of this kid play mentality and we get so beaten down into what we should be doing and who we should be. It's so liberating if we can get to that mindset more. So that was a beautiful thing. And this is just something that's going to be an inside mantra between us. And hopefully we can spread that to Web3 too, because people just need to hear that more. So
We
thank
will
you for sharing
sprinkle
that.
it.
Yes, it's beautiful. And then two, that was like my first aha moment. And I was like, there it is. And so one of the insights that I heard you say was you realized that the world was massive because of the internet. And there was so many more people and opportunities out there, which probably just blew your mind when you were going through that. And that makes sense to me as to why this entrepreneurship spirit started growing at an earlier age. My question to you, and if you don't have to talk about them at Nara, but I also like to touch on like whether it was parents or grandparents, were there any influences there about how they like just taught you how to be, or was it more the experiences that you talked about in these aha realization moments that molded the way that you are starting to think more?
Yeah, no, my parents played a significant role in my childhood. They were married almost the day before I was born, and they wouldn't let me forget that. And during my childhood, we actually, at the time, for a big part of it, it was myself, my brother who was 2 years younger than me, and a sister before it grew from there. And my father was a military man, and in his culture it's very patrilineal, so the man of the house kind of mentality. There's a generational difference. Like, you don't step into a conversation where aunties and uncles and a whole generation before you are conversing. You have no place there. And so there was a lot of rules and strictness and expectations from my father, and my mother wasn't really much of an authority in the house. So it's whatever dad says goes, right? And so dad has, optics on the family, and we all need to stay in line. And he's a military man. So that really defined like our relationship. So I had a very structured, you need to be doing something for this family. You have chores, you have homework, you get to school, you come back. And it really wasn't until my high school time that I started to venture out into hobbies and doing things, but it all had to really be with a purpose. Like, are you going to win an award? Are you going to participate in something in which you get recognition for? And if you think, you had asked about mantras. One of the things that always stuck with me about my father was this inner belief and value system that he laid out for me, saying life is a test. That's how he would explain the challenges of life to his children. And it's either you're going to pass or you're going to fail. And as a young child, and you kind of take that in, it's probably one of the reasons why I succeeded at school, because I had that in my head. And I go, well, life is a test, so is this school test. And I have one of two options, right? I'm either going to pass it or I'm going to fail. So I got to get my ducks in a row. And it created this talent or this competency in me of connecting the dots, figuring out what needed to happen to get it right, to get it
Yeah.
and pass it.
So
And
this
that is definitely something that changed over time too.
so I was about to say that because this is a fascinating topic to me. Reflecting back, life is a test, you either pass or fail. That is extremely black and white to me, and I think life is grays and very rarely black and white. So, do you I'm sure there's things that you appreciate about that statement, but maybe also subtly might disagree with now that you've evolved and gotten more knowledgeable. What are your thoughts there? I'm interested. This is a fascinating topic.
Fast forward 25 years, from becoming an adult and having that value embedded in you. What I think about that now, I can't wait to fail. Like, the faster I fail, the better I feel, because I think I had to experience failure and recognize my reaction to it, and how, deeply that failure felt. Like, oh, where do I go from here? How do I pick myself up? is this for me, or have I failed at it altogether? Like, if I failed at this one little part, does that mean that I just need to change my life, and move on? That's how deeply I felt these things, because it was a value that was instilled in me. Today, I embrace the failure. I go, man, you know what? You got to anticipate it, in fact, because it's impossible. I've never met somebody who didn't fail. And once you kind of come to these realizations that failure is actually the best thing to serve your opportunity to learn and grow, then you just kind of like bring it on. And it kind of creates more of this bravery versus this imposter syndrome of you trying to achieve something. You know, there's a beauty in trying to figure out how to make something work, how to make something get across the finish line, how to get a team, to reach a goal. And so I think I have to give that to not just my friend circle and the networks that I've built as an adult, but also the career. Because in a career, you get to really figure that out. Like, can you fail? And how much can you fail before it's just not working? And where do you need to pivot? And how do you deal with the failure? Like, what do you do with that?
And that's what I wanted to touch on, because this is interesting coming from you in the sense that, listen, we've heard a bajillion times to be successful entrepreneur, embrace the failure. But it's just like, at this point, it's been said at nauseum. It's almost a toss away comment to me. I agree with it. But from somebody like you, who failure was almost like I didn't want to fail, and now you're embracing it. I think my question to you is to come to the realization of how to deal with failure, coming from a place where it was very, very bad. Is this something learned over time, or did you have like a breaking point where you're like, I just can't feel bad failing anymore, and I got to figure out how to deal with this? Like, what's your interpretation there? Because, and in this frame, I'm interested more in you kind of explaining to the audience how you dealt with it, so people that are struggling with this too might have some tangible insight.
There's been a lot of times in both my personal life and my career where I feel like I've had to drum up the bravery to just take a chance, to do something I've never ever done before. And I think when you make a decision like that, you know what you're putting at risk. And when it doesn't work out, I think the first couple of times for me, it was like, oh man, I wasn't thinking about how I felt about it. I was thinking about how I was being seen. If people were looking at me differently, especially the people that I care about, whether it be my family or my friends or my partner or spouse at the time. And then realizing that, like, hey, this isn't their life, it's mine. So yeah, this is a moment. It's almost like a 24-hour news cycle in their life, right? There's only so much of my failure that they can hear about before it's like, okay, Carmen, what are you going to do about it? And you move on. And then I think I got to a point where I really had to internalize it and say, okay, I made this decision. Can I stand by my decision regardless of the outcome? And am I prepared for either outcome? Can I better prepare myself to be this brave to take this chance? And so I will say that it wasn't until I got into blockchain that, like, ooh, I got really tested. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I have gone through some of these big failures in my life to the point where this is okay. Like, this is okay. I just need to get used to it and understand it for what it is. And I'm understanding the volatility of all of this. And so, yeah, I kind of grew earn my stripes, I say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And I love what you said there at the end, which I think is something I can reiterate too. And especially as the older I get, just because of the product, if you have more experience, I deal with, like, I've got some things in my working career now where people are just crumbling, right? Because they don't understand the infrastructure or um, how the culture is. And I've had so much experience that it just doesn't bother me, because I've gone through these ups and downs, and I have the reference to go back on. So that failure has Now I can embrace it from being out of it, and it's actually a tool now. The tool has become a failure. So I love how you described it there, but I also like the point, and this is the something that I struggle with, and I would love your thoughts. I don't believe in the bravery part. You put it beautifully. Like, are you brave enough to accept either outcome of what you're doing? But I always, my head immediately goes to, if you're going to be brave, you basically have to blindfold and jump off a cliff. And I think a lot of times it is portrayed like that in entrepreneurship. Like, if you don't take this huge leap of faith and dedicate 3,000% of your time, you're not going to be successful. I disagree with that statement. And when I say bravery, I think it's more bravery to try new things, because I think you can take calculated risks too. But for some odd reason, my mind still goes to, if I am going to be a successful entrepreneur, I need to quit everything and only do one thing. And that's how I'm going to be successful, even though I know my mind is telling me otherwise. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, my thoughts are I've been there. I did it. It didn't work. So, that from that experience, I can look back and say that there were so many times when I tried to branch out and do something different, being raised to get an education, get a career, get a legacy, and then, wrap it up. I was like, no, that doesn't really feel right, because if I want to go fast, I want to try something that's going to get me where I feel like I'm fitting in. And I'll give you some examples. After I left the first half of my retail career, which was in wireless, I wanted something so different, out of corporate, out of tech. What can I do? I wanted to be my own boss. I didn't want to be around a team anymore. I mean, I was a servant leader for so long, and I'm like, I want to own my own paycheck. And I was still young at this time, and I decided, I'm going to go and experience affiliate marketing. I mean, you name every pyramid scheme that there was. And then
Brutal.
because of my ability to network, I was finding, founders that were trying to build their own, companies, and now becoming second in command there. And it's a lot of observation, but those were brave times for me, being like, okay, I'm kind of trusting someone else in their expertise. And oftentimes that I took these chances, one of the mistakes I made is I didn't do a lot of my own research to understand what the scope of everything was, what the industry looked like. And I was just so young and naive mindset, just let's ride the coattails of somebody who knows what they're doing. And I'll do anything. I'll do anything. Operational, sales, take a call, drive you somewhere. And I knew I had the enthusiasm to accomplish things. I knew I had the smarts to kind of be a solution driven person, but I didn't understand what was right and what was wrong given the business acumen. What's the right decision to make to get monetized? What's the right decision to make in order to gain distribution, to gain, clients? Usually I was always plugged into a corporate structure where you open the doors and then boom, here you go. Just churn and burn the customers. And I did not win at all. I did not win at all. I would say it was probably about 4 years deep of trying different companies,
Right.
working with different people. And I said, I feel like I just thrown my whole life into instability. I was putting my marriage at the time on the line, and I had to kind of wake up and get back to something that was stable and something that I knew I could grow in and get a little bit more get my bearings. So I ended up in a career for the next 10 years doing diamonds and gold and jewelry.
Interesting.
I went back.
Take me through that though. Would you have done things differently for that 4 years, or do you think being naive to the fact that there is a lot of business practices and principles you need to understand to be successful in that world is something you would have spent more time on, or you wouldn't replace it for the world? What is your reflection there? Because this is exactly what I was talking about. Is I think there's so many people that are like, oh, I'm just going to quit everything, stream full time, but they don't do the research to realize that the top 1% of the creators make a majority of the wealth, right? So what is your take on this period of your life?
In hindsight and reflecting on it, I wouldn't change it at all. Like it
Mm,
needed to happen, and 2020, it couldn't have happened at any other time. If it had
right,
happened earlier, I wouldn't have experienced the kind of growth that I needed to confirm kind of what I could accomplish in the corporate world so
right,
that I could feel comfortable going back to it. And if it had happened any later, I don't think it would have served me at all, given, where I was at in that age, what my personal life looked like in my marriage, and the kind of goals that I wanted to have. Because once that failure happened, I
hmm,
went back into the corporate life, got into something that was a little bit more high ticketed, luxury items, learning a bit more of the business acumen and leading high volume teams and gaining that experience. But I was also trying to buy my first house, trying to
right,
establish having a better car, growing up as, getting into my 30s. And so, yeah, hindsight is that was all perfect timing, but it didn't feel that way until I got into Web3 and I go, oh, I've seen this before. I know what
mm,
it looks like when somebody doesn't know what they're doing. I know what it looks like when the money's not going to come. I know what it looks like when we're asking for money and we have no plan, right?
right,
The money you're taking is not for the business, it's going to go to your rent as a founder.
hmm,
Like
hmm,
all of these bad things, my integrity was so high. But when I saw these bad practices and that's actually a little bit of what caused the failure. I didn't believe it. I was like, I don't want to be a business owner if this is how running a business is. We
yeah,
have to, really figure this out to a point where you don't know if food's going to be on the table.
right,
It's scary,
right,
actually.
right, right. Yeah, and some people do it and are okay with that, and they are convinced that that is the only way to success. I think this is my question here, and we've kind of skipped over the end of chapter 1, and we're, like, deep into chapter 2. I'm okay with that before I ask this question, unless you wanna touch on anything else in that kinda, like, schooling, high school career, because this is a fantastic conversation. Alright, we're gonna keep on rolling here because, um, what I'm interested in is you were kinda saying you don't want to be that person where whether food's gonna be on the table or not. So, you still would take the risk. I think my question is, how would you take that? Would you take that risk differently to maybe be more prepared? Or somebody that is thinking about doing this, what would your advice be to them on whether to have a nest egg or do more research, whatever that may be? I'm interested in those insights.
Well, this might actually be a little bit of a hot take because I'm going to take the answer in a different direction because
Mhm.
that experience actually really defined for me that I do not have a want or a desire to be a founder. I
Mm,
didn't want to be a CEO. And I that was a really big moment for me. I was surrounded by, your five friends around you kind of tell you what your net worth is going to be, and I was around a lot of high achievers myself. Some of
mhm,
the best people in my life have their own businesses, have their own direction and things that they're so defined for, right? And they're their own boss. And I knew through this experience, I'm like, I don't want that.
alright,
I actually found out that I want to be the supporter. I want to have the freedom to move on and find something that grows me in different ways. That I defined and understood myself as somebody who wanted to learn a lot. And I couldn't do that by locking myself down. And I
right.
had to be okay with the fact that, well, you can't have everyone be a chief, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
I leaned into that and it became part of my identity where I'm okay with saying I'm not going to be a founder. In
yeah,
the Web3 space, I was asked to be a founder many a time. And I
right,
think it's because my vibes,
yeah,
but it's not for me.
right.
It's not for me.
And what was that? What is it about it? The founder, the owner, the CEO, what is it about it that just is not attractive to you?
I love getting results and I love seeing success happen, but I always need to go and learn something new. I need a change up. I need to go out and explore something and be open to change. It's one of the favorite parts about my life is the diversity of things that I have experienced.
Mhm.
And I don't yet think that I have found the one thing that would combine the two, my love and
Mm.
passion for fleeting and being like, squirrel, here's another thing, I
So
deliver on my commitments and I'm loyal, but I need that flexibility to be like, oh, yeah, I want to go for that.
you got a little
Let's do
squirrel
that.
mentality. But
I
so
do.
this is interesting, and maybe I'm interpreting it a different way because one of the things I have been told by CEOs and founders is you get to do a lot of things. You're hit with to 45 different problems every day. Is it the fact that more of it but you're still stuck in a category building a thing? Is that what deters you? Because when it comes to problem solving, I don't think there's any shortage of variety as a CEO.
True, but I've also really kind of flexed that mentality by holding my boundaries by saying, "Hey, I'm not going to get stuck in a founder position." I've actually grown my own brand and my own, you know, company as somebody who facilitates others towards that
Uh, yeah,
success.
yeah,
It's what I already have a past of success of doing.
yeah.
When you lead high volume sales teams and you get people across a finish line with new initiatives, new products, new seasons, and new types of clients and pivots here and there, you just know that you have to serve purpose. And sometimes the founders need me more.
Right,
I
right.
serve way more founders than I do by being a founder, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, I love it, and I go from and I have similar insight to you. I want I'm fine being a managing partner. I'm fine being consulting. I'm fine having my own podcast company because that is not my I don't that company is not my end all be all. It's a creative outlet for me, right? And I can still do multiple other things. I never ever wanna own a brick and mortar anything. I don't want investing that I have to hit certain business goals. I just don't like that corporate structure or that stress to hit these targets. I want to be able because I'm firmly convinced you can build a pretty insane amount of wealth in this day and age with AI technology and everything that's happening with a team of 3 people, and I like being small and nimble like that. And so that's my take on it. Are you similar in that mindset, or is there anything you would add on to kind of my take?
Very similar. I mean, coming into the new industry and having an opportunity to kind of redefine what does the future look like in the workforce? Like idealistically, I hope that we can become individual contributors.
Mhm,
Especially with my background in corporate, like you have non-competes. You got
mhm,
to work for that one company. They're going to bleed you dry.
mhm, mhm.
And I can't use my skill set in a variety of ways. And because that's already my squirrel mentality of wanting different tasks and different challenges and different things to kind of keep me um, engaged, being an individual contributor and being contracted in this space has allowed me to kind of thrive and still
Mhm.
achieve exactly what I wanted. And I approach things with a very transparent conversation. Hey, is there something that we can do short term, right? Let's look at a goal that we have right now. What do we need to accomplish? And then let's take next steps after that. It
Right.
was such a like diversion from being in that corporate legacy. You're going to be at your one job for 40 years and then they're going to give you a watch and die. Those are generations before us.
Yeah.
And so I've actually been most happy now.
Yeah.
It did take a little bit of time to get over the fear of what's going to happen, what's going to come next. Is this going to fail? Am I going to literally have food on the table? Because there were times earlier on in the Web3 career where you're like, oh no,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that could happen. when a stable coin goes down, you're like, whoa, I didn't know that was
Yeah.
possible. With an exchange completely rug pulls, you're like, whoa, especially a tier one, you're like, whoa,
This is
right? But
not good.
then your tolerance changes.
Hmm.
Your tolerance changes for these.
Hmm.
And just like they say in crypto, like you just kind of sit back as a tenured person. You're like, yeah, I saw that coming, or I knew that it could have happened.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So we got to beautiful insight, by the way. Such a fantastic conversation. We've gone in so many different directions already. I want to get to Web3. We're going to have many more conversations for sure because we just didn't have enough time, mainly due to me, because we started a little later because I had real life work that we were talking about that, again, I can't quit that, right? And so when the meeting runs long, it is what it is. I want to get to Web3 to be able to still talk about that. But before that, I also want to give you a chance to chime in about this gold, more luxury items because you pivoted your career there. And I think that was the last thing before you pivoted into Web3, correct?
yep,
And so
absolutely.
one or two insights or just one insight from that time, learning lessons, skill sets gained, like what was the evolution in that part of your career?
Yeah, having the responsibility for higher sales goals. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, getting across the finish line, for millions of dollars in a short period of time,
Hmm.
having to kind of become brand appropriate, right? I mean, I was working at a wireless place before for 10 years. You wear a polo shirt, some jeans, that's who you meet when you walk into these stores, right? Very relaxed.
Right.
So, kind of growing up eventually. I mean, and the business acumen was definitely something that was a pillar of what that 10 years was for me. But being in that particular industry, what really surprised me was the impact that it was going to have on me in terms of my connections with people.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
when people have jewelry, oftentimes this is their treasure. This is us celebrating life and expressing love with the people that
Mhm.
matter most to us.
Mhm.
It's things that people give as inheritance.
Mhm.
People give on the most special days of their lives,
Yeah.
and so that 10 years was filled with human story. I've
Ah,
seen
beautiful.
I mean, I've seen the whole gamut. I've seen
Yeah.
the good, the bad, the ugly of relationships and the fighting over, the family jewels. And I've also seen some of the most beautiful moments where I can tell you, maybe out of your network, I might have been or will be the person in your life that would have heard and witnessed the most amount of proposals. So
Oh, I'm
many
sure.
proposals have
Yeah.
happened in front of my eyes from people of all different backgrounds, all
Yeah.
different genders, all
Yeah.
different identities, all different ages. And
So cool.
so that was probably, when I'm old and wrinkled, I will never forget. Yeah, I might forget what a KPI is and what my reports look like, but, I won't forget the days where, being shut down in COVID, people were still proposing.
Yeah.
When people die, we can still give them their husband's ring in a different form so they can always have it but still find their next love.
That's
These
so
are
beautiful.
very cool things that when I walked into Web3, I can't forget that. I can't forget
Yeah.
the humanity factor of how everything that we do, regardless of what you're selling or what you're doing, comes back to its impact on the relationship with
Y
yourself or with your family or loved ones.
and that's why I do what I do here, right? Like, I just believe in it with all of my heart, and you just said it in another way, and there's been thousands and thousands of research studies that old people that are, declining in health or maybe even be on their deathbed say literally the same thing. All of it goes away. It just matters about your loved one, the relationships that you built, and the human interaction. Like it's been proven over a very long period of time. that this is near and dear and is the center to everybody that reflects on their life, but we make it so confusing. My question to you is, why is that? Why do you think we make it so confusing? You had an interesting way of getting there that, looking back, a KPI, who gives a shit about a KPI? The proposal is what's going to stick with you. What are your thoughts on that? Why don't more people come to that realization and make life decisions based on that realization, knowing it's been proven time and time and again?
I think I think in some ways, and this doesn't always have to be negative,
Hmm.
we guide ourselves based on of expectation.
Yeah.
Whether it's expectation at work, it's expectation from your circle of friends, or expectation from your family. And I think it's the duty of any one person to be their authentic self.
Mm,
And
mm,
there are pressures. I mean, we just have to come to the reality. There are pressures of what your role is in, like, in your closest circle. For most of us, it's your family.
yeah.
If you're the provider, if you're the if you're the person who has to nurture, if you're the person who has to be the solutions person, there's a lot of expectation and pressure. And I think sometimes we do things that are not in alignment with our authentic self because we we feel so compelled that we have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And maybe we forget that we have to challenge ourselves to find a way to still be able to accomplish it, but not dishonor the thing that we need to do to be ourselves.
Right.
And I think for you and I, because I've been in a position too where, while trying to find my footing in blockchain, I had to work the Web 2 job. I
Yeah.
had to have, the my foot in both worlds. And it was tough and it was extremely scary because you just don't know if it's working until it does,
Yeah.
and that's that bravery part again. And so the expectation during those times, I think I was holding it against myself more than others.
My screen just fell over. This has happened in a podcast
No.
before. A
One of them.
little windy in here. Hold on real quick. There we go. I think I'm gonna have to take the fan down a notch. It was really kicking up the. There it goes again. Hold, please. I'm redoing my podcast room. That's why I have this green screen for now. I'm like repainting it. I'm gonna make it look pretty like yours. I'm pretty
Oh,
excited
okay.
about it, but it's gonna take some time. You said something really, really interesting though, and I think this is, and we're gonna transition into Web3. You said something that I thought I wanted, but the best thing I ever did was not quit Web3, because I have actually come to the realization I never want to work in Web3 full time. I don't think it's for me. And I think Web3 is a means to create beautiful businesses, but do I think my podcast can exist outside of Web3 and probably be way more successful outside of Web3? Absolutely. Um, I've met some of the friends that I'll have for the rest of my life. My co-founder Bubble, who you talk to, I've talked to every day for the last 9 months. Have not talked to him for a day. Met him in Web3. Love the whole ethos of Web3. Hate how it operates. Hate that it's actually taking way longer than I think it should to get out of the hype cycle marketing, to deal with the scammers, right? Because there's so much money at stake and these people are just coming out of the woodwork. So actually, the operational side of how Web3 is working, just don't want to be a part of it. But it has profoundly impacted my life and changed it forever. It's interesting to me that a majority of the people I talk to think making it is working in Web3 full time. What's your take on that after hearing my thoughts?
I think a job is a job. Like whatever income you
Interesting.
drive is there. I actually don't even see any issue with, your perception of it, because eventually I think it's going to work. It's kind of like me going back to 1996 and web 1 and saying, "Oh, I want to work in the internet or I don't want to work in the internet." Like
Right.
it's just going to be the divider between what is and what isn't. This is something that I see is going to be fundamentally like integrated into a lot of things. This is why I see every
100%.
facet, every sector coming into this. This is probably why we call it Web3, right? This is how we
Right.
define it and how we explain it to novices. And I think that's okay. Like people need to find their balance.
Yeah.
And I found a pathway to success by actually my skill set is more geared towards onboarding the web 2, and the way that I'm more successful at that is to not tell them to do it the crypto way. It's about honoring your mission. It's about honoring what you have already built. And it's basically like me walking into a cookie shop in 1996 and saying, "Hey, this internet's going to help your business, but guess what? You're still going to have to make great cookies." Like
Right.
it's
Right.
not going to change the nature of a cookie. It's going to be that.
Yep.
But these are just, intelligence tools. And I think from a humanitarian standpoint, there's really exciting things in terms of authenticity and truth and, clarity and being able to have a transparent nature to how we manage our information or privacy. I mean, there's so many great frontiers ahead.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that I've been able to stay in this is to actually be more frictionless and open minded. Um,
100%.
my tasks to accomplish a revenue goal, to get somebody monetized, to bring strategic partners in, that's me using my competencies that I've built over my career to gain income today. And at the
Yeah.
same time, I'm learning about cryptocurrency and I'm learning about building my wealth. And, I'm not a trader. I wouldn't consider myself a degen. I'd like to say I speak it, but I'm very conservative, and an accumulator, a hodler. um, but what I see in terms of the future is like I don't know if we really understand what this is going to end up being. I think there's a lot of potential, but I don't think that there's enough eyes on it yet. We need the best of the best.
And so you said what I think, I've come to hold on real. Um, so you said what I think is the most important, and it is more the realization. I actually hate the term Web3 in the sense that I've grown to hate the term Web3 because it's just blockchain, it's NFTs, it's cryptocurrency. And to your point, I think this is what people should be thinking about. My skill set is in branding and marketing and creative and design. And the more I think of how can I apply those skill sets to the things I want to do, the more I feel comfortable and the more I can get out of this like crypto's Twitter sphere and get frustrated at dealing with the shit bags that I've had to deal with and dealing with the toxicity because it just doesn't matter to me anymore. Right. Like it makes sense to me that I'm going to try to help some people out that I believe in, that have an idea for a media company that bridges Web 2 and crypto native people is what I'm going to say, not Web3. But that makes sense because it aligns with my skill set and something I'm passionate in. I'm passionate of unlocking creativity in human beings, and so I think that's what people need to think about more than just saying like I want to be in Web3. And you said it beautifully. Let's use that time to kind of transition. And I know we don't have tons of time, but I can go past a little bit. My little man's still sleeping, but I eventually when he wakes up, I'll have to go. Let's talk about the beginnings of Web3. What excited you? Was it the typical you saw the dollar signs, or was there something else? And what was that kind of entry gateway for you?
Okay. You might hear my dog in the background because somebody just rang the doorbell.
All good.
But so I actually was on a vacation from work, Web 2, and I wasn't going to go anywhere. So I spent the week learning something new, like I do. Give me 1 second. So I spent that week learning something new, and that was the week that I opened up my Coinbase account. And then I went through the rabbit hole. And I would say this was in 2021, January. That month, Bitcoin was going to hit an all time high at the end of the month. We're about to go into Shiba Inu, to the moon, vibes with Elon on SNL and working through the halvening, that happened the year prior and going into a bull run, right? I had no clue what I was getting into. I have no trading background. I have no tech background. But I'm really good at learning. So
Mm.
by that June, I got into DeFi. And by the end of the summer, I started getting on teams. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I just understood people, and I understood that as I was learning who's running these Discord and Telegram and Twitter chats, that they're normal people. I'm not quite sure if they have ever done this before, if they've ever run a business. So let me offer my services. In the beginning, it was a lot of sweat equity. It was a lot of being frictionless just to learn. And that
Mhm.
was really what I was there for. I maintained my career and my job, and I was managing my teams. And I was moonlighting as a community mod, manager, and then given all kinds of titles. And then that's when I realized, you know what? Call me head janitor. It doesn't matter. Like, what do you need me to do, right? What do we got to do to succeed? And I did experience success. I was a part of token launches that were very successful, that yielded lots of money. I went into NFTs, then I started going into platforms, then I started going into events. And I was really just trying to figure out, like, who understands the assignment? Like, who am I meeting that can put off a successful event? Who can sustain a token, 3 months post launch? Who can actually launch a marketplace that's going to compete with some of the biggest, one or two names in the industry? Magazines, like anybody who needed operational help or guidance on how to monetize or build revenue, I was giving my 2 cents. And I was getting out from behind the screen. And I wasn't trying to be a key opinion leader. I wasn't trying to build my own brand. I was doing it because I knew there was no university that was going to teach me this. I
Mm.
realized that all the educational platforms are startups, and
Yeah,
that the only
yeah.
way I was going to learn the ropes was to actually do. And so I went out there and just did, and then didn't stop doing. So over the course of 5 years, though, I've been a part of some fantastic projects. And I agree with you. I don't know if Web3 is the right term for what we do. When I walk into corporate offices, when I talk to billionaires, I use blockchain. I talk about business intelligence tools.
Right.
I talk about ledger systems. I don't talk about any one, type of our tech. I talk about how can we use all of them, right, to support the business that you have already built. And when is the right time for you to come in and adopt that? More times than not, I learned that I was telling people no. No, the answer is not an NFT collection by itself. No, tokenizing and creating a token or a meme coin is not the answer. Like, you're an airline. Like, you're one of the biggest government contractors in the country. You are a government entity for a state. These were things that, because I had started from the degen and DeFi space, I understood the optics. I understood that Shiba Inu and the meme coins were going to make the news and people were interested in that. And I get it. Like, it would be stupid for, a CEO not to address that. But in my view, I was always trying to protect the business that they've already built. And I wanted to create adoption that was going to provide stability and scalability and sustainability. So I started really kind of calming people down and saying, okay, let's step away from the monetization of this technology, and let's talk about how we can fundamentally prepare you for interoperability. How can we prepare you and optimize your processes? How can we authenticate, things that are happening in your business so that you don't have to inspect what you expect unless there's a problem? And if there is a problem, you know that what you're reading and seeing is true, right? So along the way, there's been really cool projects that I've worked on. And even to today, what I serve in terms of being a crypto strategist, it's very high level. Like, I wouldn't say that I don't have a coding background. I couldn't even do a Certic audit or make an application to list your token on an exchange. There's other people on a team that do that. But I'm here as the idea person to help you understand how you can truly use the technology and where to not go too far, because some of these things won't exist 5 years from now. They won't be allowed to.
Right. Just due to regulation and everything.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think some of the biggest mistakes people have made over the last couple of years and are still making?
From the Web 2 side, I think that they're using it as just a brand extension. It's not really changing their business. It's not really going to impact their clients. It's not going to impact the touch points or pain points of what their business mission is. They're just like, cool, let's launch an NFT. I've seen casinos. For those of you watching, I'm out here in Las Vegas. I've seen casinos do the NFT, thing with charms and reward systems and stuff like that. Yes, it's cool. And yes, it's probably one of the lowest risk things that you can integrate right now. But it doesn't do anything for our industry, and it really doesn't do much for your people. I mean, if a retail user or if your client is using it, they don't get it. The people in the meeting get it, who created the flow for it to happen. But I like to be a part of things that actually set you up for success for the future. And sometimes it's not the sizzle reel that you want it to look like. It's boring stuff, but it's stuff that really does give a business a competitive advantage when the lights go on and regulation is clear. And they can go, yep, we can integrate with that now. We've defined who the big players are. We understand where's the place that where's the safest wallets, where's the safest place to hold your assets, how do we protect your identity, how do we maintain your privacy. We're still figuring that out. And once we figure that out, anybody who's just building the infrastructure using business intelligence tools and preparing their business to turn on the lights and connect on chain, they're going to find the biggest wins.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. What about the Web3 side? Mistakes people are still making.
I think that we try to mirror the traditional systems too much. Oh, if it worked over there, I think a lot of guessing comes into the mix. This is part of the reason why I'm with Onchain, is because I'm with a team that really wants to research what is it that we know for sure. What do the numbers say? How objective and transparent can we be? How do we understand what marketing is not telling us? Because there's too many Web3 systems and communities and projects that I think that they're just like, I think this will work, right? Or I've seen them do it, let's do it, but we have a dev that's going to do it a little different, right? And I'm not to say that this shouldn't exist, like the DeFi space, the degen space. I have such a heart for it, because to me, I'm going, well, if there's one thing I've observed, is that one truth we know is that money changes people. But what we're witnessing and what we're observing is that when money has no barrier to entry and people can drum up things without a license, without a bank account, and just take, the value extraction that we're talking about, is there something still good about that we are not seeing because of the toxicity, because of the scamminess? Are humans, should we be allowed to interact however we want peer to peer? Like, there's a revolution in the mindset here, and sometimes the malicious side of it really helps us. Like, how many of our freedoms have we given up to protect ourselves, or being told that we need to protect ourselves because of it, right? So I
Yeah.
want us to kind of, sometimes I think we need to slow down and say, okay, yes, we need to address the bad things that happen, but let's not just give up the fact that we can transact peer to peer and that it can happen like this, and that I don't need anyone's permission to do it. That is a beautiful thing. It is something that
Hmm.
for the first time ever in humanity is happening.
Yeah.
And so, beyond the barter system,
Yep.
and I want us to figure that out. But
Yeah.
we're close. We could be
Yeah.
close. I think we have some ideas, but we need to cook it.
And so, oh, so much beautiful insight. Take me into, you kind of mentioned it, why you're at Onchain, because they're really setting out to look at the data and figure out sense of all of this craziness, correct? Is that one thing? What else? Talk to me about what they do. Talk to me about why you're excited, and what you're currently working on.
So I joined the team about the end of Q1 of this year. And what a family I have found. I mean, extremely exciting. Not only are they still within their first 2 years since launching, but they came from, the Lisk family, and knowing that there's a history there, that there's a team on the foundation that believes in this technology and wants to do something about it. It was very interesting to me to find researchers in this space, because if there's anything you have access to, it's the KOLs, it's the influencers, it's the marketing, it's the news. And, it's very far and few between that you find a team that actually has the academic competencies and background to say, okay, we need something more objective. But more so, their mission was to bring everyone on chain. And I get that. And I've already been a part of so many different types of companies and projects. And I see the risk that we have to take when you tie yourself to code, when you tie yourself to, oh my gosh, we're a layer one. Now we have to become a layer two. Oh my gosh, we have to migrate. Oh my gosh, that's no longer relevant. Oh no, a renounced contract isn't the way to build trust. Like, when you get with a technology company, that technology can just become null and void at the breakneck speed at which we move. So I kind of needed to find stability again in this space. And I did it by finding a company that had a good mission, that was going to do it through research. And I was like, I can get behind that. And more so, we think we're defining, how do we not look at Web 2 and Web 3 separately and say Web 3 will become Web 2 and Web 2 will become Web 3, or whatever it's going to look like. But for right now, we need to have a presence in Web 3. We need to understand how it operates, and we kind of need to make sure that the research that we have about it gets into the hands of those that are curious about it, trying to define whether or not this is the right move and pivot for their business, whether or not it's time to transform now. And I'm down with that. Like, from a business development standpoint, that's what I live and breathe for. And through the successes, I think that that's where we'll understand whether or not there's a future there.
How much do you think what we're doing right now, the human side of it, how important is that to the evolution of this coalescing of Web 2, Web 3?
I think that history has an opportunity to be rewritten on chain. I think that when I think about blockchain at its most simplest form, the fact that it's immutable is one of the biggest features that stands out for me in terms of its power to record human history.
Mm.
We may not be able to dissect our past, and we only have finite amount of understanding based on what still survives today, artifacts from Egypt and,
Right.
the Bible times and Roman times. But right now, digitally, we have an opportunity to encapsulate things that we know to be true, whether it's somebody's feelings, somebody's secrets, somebody's life story, a bio, a KPI, a moment in
Right.
history. If I were to look and say, okay, if I had ownership over my identity and everything from my birth certificate to the receipt from my Starbucks that I bought this morning
Yeah.
was in there, what would it say about me? And beyond my life, if somebody looked into that capsule,
Yeah.
what would they learn about this moment in time? Right? Like that
Beautiful.
to me gets me so excited.
Yeah.
Um, and more so, I'm like, I find so many moments in my life like this, like interviewing with you, where reminiscing about things brings up things you forgot about
Oh, yeah.
until this moment.
Yeah.
Blockchain might give me the ability to just flip through my entire life and see all
Mhm.
these amazing things that I should never forget.
Yeah.
And so, from a human standpoint, I get it. Today, I'm really working with companies, I'm working with businesses, I'm working with communities, and this cool factor of being in crypto and blockchain. But at the heart of it, what I'm really excited about is how is this going to define humanity? How are we going to understand humans more? How does this differentiate from our human soul and spirit from the artificial intelligence that we're now introducing into our world? And
Ah.
so, what a time to be alive.
Oh my
And
God.
yes, I take it day by day. Today, I'm not changing the world,
Right.
but I'm doing my part to understand it while it matures. And I hope that as a millennial, an elder millennial, when I get into, my 50s and getting close to retirement, that I can have the wisdom to help guide where it goes once put in a towel and say, it's on an island for me. See
Yeah.
ya.
But you're changing your life today because we have had this podcast and now it could become an NFT if you wanted it to be. Maybe I should start at doing that with my podcast, is just putting them on the blockchain for my guests so they have that piece of history. I mean, I think it makes sense. And I'm dealing with I'm part of this community. Mikey, he's been on my podcast. His name's Mikey too. Running a company called Think Agents, which is basically about open source, creating your soul. His platform is called Souls, which is your AI agent soul. And this agent is you as a digital identity, and blockchain makes that. It's been really interesting to see the AI and crypto bros who hated each other now come together because they're like, oh shit, for AI to be successful, I need the blockchain, right?
Yeah.
And even more critical over the next 2 years, where we're already like, I can show my mom on LinkedIn a fake news report of an alien ship coming out of the ocean. She's like, oh shit, we're gonna die. Like, that's today. So
Yeah.
a year from now, look out. So what's the only thing that's going to be left is blockchain to discern, is it real or not? And even then, I'm sure people are going to try their damnedest to figure out how to hack that system. So we have to figure this out like yesterday anyways. And it's going to be, because it's a defining part of our future. That the history of the universe is happening right now, and we're a part of it. How freaking cool is that? And I love the way
So
that
cool.
you put it. We have so many more things to talk about. I do want to give you the opportunity before we wind it down here. I always have one last question I ask every guest. Before I do that, next 3 to 6 months, love to hear your thoughts about what you're thinking about working for Onchain, what you're thinking about with the space, and what you're excited about.
I think what I'm most excited about, especially with Onchain, we're really starting to take a look and say we're kind of a litmus test right now. We have experienced some really big milestones, leading up to this year. There's huge disruption. Macroeconomics is really giving us a run for our money in terms of like Where's global liquidity going to be? Who's adopting things? ETFs have come into the mix. And even though I haven't been through as many cycles as some of my favorite people in Web3, it feels different. It really feels different. And one of the things that I think feels most different is the optics in terms of curiosity for Web2 businesses. We've recently been doing some studies, and I can't share too much alpha, but let me tell you, I was shocked at the numbers. Some samples that we've taken in terms of survey have really uncovered the sentiment of like, yes, I need to understand this space. I understand that I might be left behind or I might lose a competitive advantage if I don't explore this. But in terms of will I do something about it today? It's hard to bridge the gap and make it relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like a step forward because when I first entered, we couldn't even use a credit card, right? To buy crypto. So again, it's breakneck speed. Like when you're in it day to day and you're in it full time, it's a whole different dimension and time perception. But from the outside looking in, wow, I'm really glad I stayed because something is happening here where we're starting to see a pivot of curiosity. And I think we're just on the precipice of trying to understand clarity. Now,
explain
at
real quick. Precipice of curiosity in what way? I'm trying to understand how you're defining curiosity in this instant.
So I think in the years prior, cryptocurrency and what it means, it was hard to make sense what Ethereum was going to mean to a business. We're still defining blue chips and altcoins and creating our factions, almost like the Hunger Games. Like we're trying to figure out what's a DAO, what's a metaverse, what's an NFT. Should an NFT project now tokenize? Should a token now become, NFT rewards? Like we're still figuring out foundation. And I think in some sense we are. But now we've walked into a place where there's a little bit more standard. Like even retail investors are expecting a founder to know stuff, right? They're expecting more than just a one facet smart contract. So we are maturing. But on a macro level, we're starting to see a lot more positive optics on tokenizing in treasuries, right? What does AI and blockchain look like? What does DeSci look like and sound like? So now we're getting down to some facets of our industry that are actually applicable to companies, to businesses, to governments, to countries, right? To global systems. And with that being said, it's a matter of can we build the trust? Can we build the trust? And regulation clarity is going to give us those rails. But the problem is that when I sit in a Twitter space and say my 2 cents, I go, here's what I know to be true. Most of the people in this room who can go from Ethereum to Binance and buy a token probably know more than the people who are building, the stablecoin act, who are having a say in what should and should not be on an SEC application. There's a whole gamut of big and small, in this space, and there's not a lot of overlap. So institutions and DeFi have a big problem in terms of like how they're going to operate. And it's exciting times because I think we all want to see adoption, but I'm very weary on whether or not the technology is going to be used in the right way. And again, I bring it back to my point of I want to see innovation. I don't want to see just old systems built on chain.
Yeah, man, beautiful way to encapsulate that. Anything on Onchain or you personally that like in the future, like things that you're excited to work on? I think you did a really good job of like talking about it macro level. Anything more specific? If not, It's okay. Believe it or not, we've been almost talking for an hour and 40 minutes at this point. It seems like 10. Uh,
Yes, I will tell you this for everyone watching. One of the most exciting things that I'm looking forward to in terms of Onchain is, one of our biggest challenges is going to be how can we provide great information in a timely manner to a decision maker? There are so many ways that we can digest information. In fact, it's almost worse than some traditional industries because we have access to on chain data. So now, it's not a matter of this person holds the keys to the data. This is like public data is out there and it's very noisy. And I think what we're looking to accomplish is how can we get founders timely information to help them make the best decisions in an objective manner? It's difficult. It's very difficult to think how do we cut through the noise and how we avoid, becoming a place where you're just getting a buying signal. Because I don't think it's only about the money. I think it's about the impact. It's about, a business owner who wants to achieve a dream, build a legacy, have something that impacts people's lives. So that is what I'm excited about as we roll into year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. VC capital venture firms often think that, an incubation time is 5 to 7 years. We are still very young and we've accomplished so much. And we have such a diverse, competent team that I'm happy to be a part of the family. And I'm also
so
happy to be
cool.
a part of it, bringing my talent to it and working with a few like you to make the biggest splash.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it there, which is um, cutting through the noise. And I actually think, yes, it's difficult, but if you go down to like first principles of what makes somebody worth listening to, it can get pretty clear pretty quick. You can throw out 80% of crypto Twitter, if not more, right? And so, and I've seen this revolution, which gets me excited for what you're talking about. Is there's been a fundamental shift in the founders, one, experience, but two, they're thinking about how to utilize the technology to build a business, not it being the business. And so, as long as you are finding these people that are thinking that way, um, like even hype cycle marketing, just throw all of that out, right? Spying signals, just throw all of that out. The narratives in the Twitter spaces, and there are actually way more Twitter spaces that are starting to pop up where people are actually talking about what's really happening, not just a bunch of BS. So I think it's actually, I know it's tough now. It might get easier in the future as this place matures because you're going to be able to start finding those trusted sources. It'll be interesting. I don't know which way it's going, but I can feel a maturity based on the people that, like you, for instance. You're now been in Web3 full time, working in Web3 full time. You are knowledgeable than 98% of the founders I had in the first 6 months on this show. And that speaks light years of how much we evolved, and the people like you and me that love this space are actually trying to understand how this works and are not just here for a quick flip. And that excites me. That excites me so much. So I
I
totally
get
agree
very
with you.
excited.
Yes, I get so excited. All right, one last question. We're gonna wrap it up. This has been amazing. You have had so many beautiful insights, but I'll recap that. So basically, I'll ask you my last question, and then I will give you my final thoughts, and we'll call it a day. And I'll go wake up my little tyke. So the last question is this: it's very simple. You have been part of a bajillion Twitter Spaces. Maybe you've been on some podcasts. You're literally working on with a company that does research. How do you think your time on the Mikey G podcast experience went to the other things that you experienced in the Web3 world?
I have never, in my entire time in Web3, gone through who Carmen is to what she does. You went from Carmen to Carmen Crypto in a matter of 2 hours. And I actually think that on all the spaces and all the streams, I often have to come to the table to be a brand ambassador, to be a representative for a business, or come in as an expert, or somebody who can actually come in and give best practices. And you changed that today. You really changed that today. I think that
I
there are going to
do.
be people that I have known since day one that I've been in this space that could listen to this and learn something new that they never knew about me. Because my hats that I wear, there's so many of them. So when I come in, I have to come in, execute, and stay professional. But you gave me an experience where we found out who Carmen really is behind the Carmen Crypto. So
That
thank you for
gave
that.
me chills. Thank you. Because that's exactly what I'm going for. And what I love about what we did here, though, is because I know your background, because I know you are a human being, as you got into the Web3 and talking about on-chain, it was so much more believable because it's very difficult to just do what we did and be a bullshitter the whole time. Now, by the way, there has been, I'd say, hundreds of founders, one or two people that did an amazing job. And it actually wasn't even like they had the skill sets, they were just ruggers, right? And they didn't go there. But somebody like you that has shared the authentic, genuine, that's one thing you can't fake. And if I were to look back at the podcast, at the one or two people that were those actual ruggers, you could tell they had like a little bit of ego, a little flash around them. Whereas you deeply thought about what you said, deeply meant what you said. And so when we got into that Web3 and you started talking about strategy and what you liked about the space and what you felt like was going to happen in the future, it was so much more believable by what we did. And that's why I love what I do. But on the other side, like you said, it's a cool experience for you too, because you get to talk about the things that you're just so sometimes feels robotic in this space. And I think my hope is that since we have this new era of technology yet changing again, we can instill humanity back into a lot of things, because if we don't, I think we're really fucked, to be honest. And so that's my goal, right? And you experienced some of that today. And I've been shocked about the top tier founders that have come on this show and have bared all. I mean, deep, dark things. And I don't know if that's a product of how I run the show, or if it's a product of how I run the show and people understanding that maybe this is more critical than we ever thought before as technology shifts. I don't know, but it's been a
It's you.
beautiful.
I will
Thank
say
you.
it's you.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate it.
it's the way you approach things. It's always being an active listener. I felt like I was heard.
Yeah.
I felt like I was heard.
And I think it's another, I really appreciate that. I think that's a skill set that's actually, again, people think like, oh, active listening, that's easy. It's like, no, this has taken me years to do. And it's a product of being able to listen, but then also react in an appropriate way to elicit more information or correctly move on to the next subject because it feels like a natural break. Like, these are all just like detailed things that at some point you pick up. I will say this, if my final comments about you, I do believe we started a friendship. I think you are a warm and inviting person. You're somebody I want to continue and learn and grow with in this space. I really look forward to figuring out how we can continue to partner together. You can do exactly what I'm doing because you come off so genuine and calm and insightful and caring. And I know people felt that. And that is the one thing I actually didn't say to you that I usually talk about a lot. And I know this is going to happen is I think one of the most impactful moments was this deep conversation about failure and what that looked like in your life, and then how that expanded upon Web3 and the insight that you had and the way that you approached it. By the way, these topics are the same pretty much every show, right? Like this is not rocket science on success and progress. It's failure, it's adversity, it's learning and growing all these insights. But you gave yet a different angle. And I actually learned a lot today about how you talked about all of these different subjects. But the way that you did it, I know somebody's going to listen to them. It's going to profoundly impact them. We have made an impact on somebody's life today. And at the end of the day, you did that because you shared your story in your own way. And somebody's going to be able to relate to you that's been in retail, that's worked in gold, that lives in Vegas, that's been scammed on the Web3, it has tried to make a career in Web3 and understood one of the other beautiful insights that I think you said was you sat back and listened and you didn't get caught up too much in the hype and the notion, and you dedicated your time to giving but understanding how things work. And that is such a critical piece of advice, especially for someone that's trying to do what you've done. And so those are just 2 things off the top of my head. There was at least 40 to 50 things. I could easily make 70 shorts out of this conversation. And you did that because you shared beautiful knowledge and you did it with deep intent and insight. So I appreciate you. I am so glad that we met. And I think we have a bright future together in what we're doing personally and also figuring out how we can help each other grow. So thank you so much for your time. And it was an amazing conversation.
Thank you for sharing your energy with me. Deal on the friendship. We look like a pinky swear.
It's pinky swear.
Five.
Pinky swear and a high five. It's happening. Yeah. So I'll hit you up in Telegram. We'll talk about like when it makes sense for us to link back up. We'll recap. We'll do all the fun things. But with that being said, little man's starting to kick his legs. It is perfect timing for me to roll out. Mikey G and Carmen, we love you all. That was an incredible conversation. And we are out.